wherever everybody is. Welcome to a workshop. My name is Minahi Niazi. I'm the administrative and event coordinator at the Innovation Cluster, and I'm so glad that you could join us today for a special workshop, 10 Secrets to Repeatable and Scalable Sales, powered by the Traction Canvas. For all of those who are unfamiliar, who are new to us, the Innovation Cluster is a nonprofit organization. We support tech founders with mentorship, programming, and connections to industry experts and partners. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs move from MVP plus to real growth by giving them the strategies, tools, and networks they need to succeed. Today's session is actually a preview of our upcoming 5-week sales mastering series. And that's going to be a deep dive program designed to help founders build a clear, structured approach to customer acquisition and scalable skills. Before we get started, just a few quick house rules. Feel free to turn your cameras on if you're comfortable. It's always nice to see your faces. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout, so please don't hesitate to drop in your questions or comments throughout the session. We will be sharing the recording afterwards that you can revisit at any moment. And at the end, I'm going to launch a quick feedback survey. It's just going to be one question, so your input is really valuable to us. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our two incredible speakers, Brandy Old and Craig Elias. Brandy is an experienced startup coach specializing in helping founders de-risk and validate their business ideas, and Craig is a globally recognized entrepreneur, sales expert, and pitch coach. Together, Brandy and Craig bring a wealth of knowledge across entrepreneurship, sales, strategy, and innovation. And today they're going to be giving you a strategic overview of the most powerful customer acquisition tactics used by performing startups to go from 1 to 100 customers and beyond. That being said, I am going to hand it over to Brandy to take over the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Mina. So, welcome to our session today where we're talking about 10 secrets to repeatable sales and how you scale. So Craig, let's check. We've got some fun control systems going on with Zoom today. So thanks for bearing with me. So we've got a bunch of people from all over the place that registered for this. Craig, what are some of the cities?
There were 63 different cities. So folks from as far away as like Amsterdam, Bhopal, Cambridge, Dreek, Frankfurt, Halifax, Ho Chi Minh City, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Montreal, New York, Paris, Peterborough, of course, Saskatoon, Singapore, Tunis, Waltham Forest, and Winnipeg.
So if you've seen our stuff before, if you haven't seen our stuff before, this slide talks about the #1 predictor to the secret of your success as an entrepreneur. So if you already know the answer, I think I saw Nikki on the call. We'll get you to be quiet and we'll see if some folks are brave enough to unmute or put in the chat. What do you think the #1 predictor of success for an entrepreneur is? Keeping working on it. It's a really good guess, but that's not the answer. Failing fast, hard, and often. Brady, good guess. Marketing. eToro's got a ton of great guesses, but they're all not quite right. Ability to sell.
So can I just say something for eToro? So eToro, what you're going to learn today is sales comes before marketing. So we're going to help you understand marketing as a place, but it's farther at the end. Okay. Carmen's close in some respects.
Mm-hmm. So the actual answer is the size of your network, Katerina. So we want to help you grow that network. So what we'd like you to do while we're going through our introduction, go to your LinkedIn, copy the whole URL, get the HTTPS in it, post it in the chat. And because we've got a global audience today, why don't you put in where you're tuning in from? And we'll give a challenge out to accept 2 different connections today. So not only are you going to put your LinkedIn in the chat, but actually go out and try to connect with folks. And there's some really interesting research that just came out from, was it McKinsey, Craig, about your international market, your global market?
Yeah, something like you're 350% more likely to get to $50 million in revenue or more if you have an international component to your network.
So let's say, what is that movie where Matthew McConaughey's in it? Like, let's pump those numbers. So What we're going to be doing today is covering 10 tactics in about 50 minutes. So it's going to be like drinking from a fire hose. So our invitation for you today is you can either be like the kid on the left or the dad on the right. And we want to invite you to go for the ride, have a good time. This will be recorded. You can come back to it. And we're going to actually talk a little bit about our deeper dive that we'll go into. So Mina already gave a little bit of an introduction. I'm Brandy. I live in a town called Lethbridge, Alberta. So I'm about 4 hours away from Banff and about 2 hours away from Montana. So I get to spend a lot of time in the mountains. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But my true passion really is, and why Craig and I do this stuff, is we really care about helping first-time entrepreneurs avoid all the mistakes that we've seen people make, that we've made ourselves, so that we can help you build really cool companies to change the world. Craig, who are you?
I am, or I often describe myself as the other half of the Brandy and Craig show. My core piece is sales. Brandy and I connect on all kinds of different things. We are more than equals in many places. There's a couple of places you'll notice as we go through this presentation. Brandy's way better than I am. In fact, it's the first thing that we actually get into. We have visited and spoken at incubators and accelerators scattered all over the planet. If you would like a copy of today's slides, this is the QR code you need to use to get our copy of our slides. We're not going to show this again at any other point throughout the presentation. So if you think you want the slides, this is the slides you want to take a picture of so you can then get them. And what I'm going to do, while I'm assuming there are people that are still taking pictures, is I'm going to talk to the next slide, but I'm not going to go to the next slide to give people lots of chance to use the QR code, make sure it works. So what's inside today's presentation? We're going to talk about 3 different things that are required to build repeatable and scalable sales. The first thing is you need to learn, and we'll talk about what are the things you need to learn. And then what we'll do is show you how you then transition from learning to earning. And then when you've done the right amount of earning, you can then find a way to scale, which comes back to the marketing that was mentioned earlier. So those are 3 things we're going to talk about. So the learn component, the whole idea here is there are 5 things you need to do, right, as you go through this learning process. And the goal here is to get 10 what are often called innovators as customers. And this whole process is led by the founder. We'll touch on all 5 of these things. And then you need to pause. Pause until you get 10, and then you're going to decide, do you need to pivot, or are you doing the right things? And if you're going to proceed, then you move to the next stage where you earn. And there are 4 specific things we're going to teach you around how can you find a way to earn more. The goal here is you're going to get up to 100 early adopters. The founder is no longer leading these sales. They're still involved. They've gone away. They've either outsourced this or hired a junior person. Right? These are the 4 things that is going to happen to help you earn more. Then you're going to pause here until you get to 100. And once you've done that, then you've built a scalable process. Now what happens is you can then use what is called a marketing moat to be able to drive more revenue. But all of this is around this strategy around how do we get customers? And it's really simple. All you have to do is say the right things to the right people at the right time. So this is based on what some folks will know of as the technology adoption curve, or sometimes also called the market adoption curve. And the whole goal is the first part of what we're going to share with you is focused on these innovators, as people that are more likely to become your customer when you get started. And the red card shows you all the different things they care about. So we built very specific steps to help you master selling to this group. And then once you've done the learn part, now we're focused on the early adopters. And this whole process now is built around the things that these folks tend to care about. And then when you're done there, then you're going to try and focus on the early majority. And these are the things that the early majority cares about. And this is why the marketing mode is so important. But it all starts with problems. And Brandy is going to help us kick it off.
Totally. So one of the things I want to just highlight is you guys are the first people that get to see what we've built out around this traction journey that Craig just showed you. So in true fashion of what we teach, if you have feedback for us on what you see after today, please let us know. We are definitely open ears to hear from you. So we want to focus on problems with our first sales. And the reason we want to do this is we need to make sure that we are positioning our product or our service in the right lens. So the question I'll ask you is, do you think it's better to be a vitamin or a painkiller? Put some responses in the chat for your product, for your customer. Is it easier to sell a vitamin or is it easier to sell a painkiller? Awesome. Okay, we're aligned. Painkiller, right? I might want to take calcium so I don't get osteoporosis when I'm older, but I'm not very good at taking it. But if I need my inhaler for my asthma every day, you bet I'll remember to take it. So one of the people that talks a lot about this was Albert Einstein. And he said, if I have 1 hour to try to solve a problem, I'm going to spend 95% of it focused on obsessing on the problem because we trust that we're innovative enough to come up with cool ideas. So you're all entrepreneurs, you're doing your work because you're a creative thinker. So what we want to try to do is push you into this problem space so you can come up with an even better idea that catches fire. And the way you do this is by playing something called problem bingo. So there are 6 characteristics to any problem, and you want to try to figure out how you can have a solution that nails a problem that has more of these characteristics. So you don't have to have all 6, but the more you have, the better. So if it's an urgent problem that people have to solve right now that can't wait, that's a good problem to be solving. Something that's popular where a lot of people have it is also good. If it's a growing problem, so it's getting worse and worse for the people that experience it over time, we want to try to solve problems that people bump into often. So is this something that they happen to run into every month, every quarter, every week, every day? If we're selling Christmas trees, that's once a year. That's a really tough business model. So we also want to try to find a way to solve expensive problems. And most people think of expensive as, oh, they're tossing a ton of cash at it. But we can also think of expensive coming from energy or resources from human capital as well. And then the last thing is it a mandatory problem that needs to be solved? So oftentimes when we fall into our problem space with our business idea, we're solving something that's a nice to have, not a need to have. So this is a very important moment that you want to look through. And as you go through this, what we want you to do is craft a problem statement that resonates with these innovators. So we're going to talk about these ICPs that I'll talk about in a second when we go through bifurcation, but these are your ideal client profiles. So these 10 customers that are going to be your first customers have to have a problem that's caused by something that makes them motivated to change. And Craig will talk about that trigger event. Because they run into these problems, they have all these consequences. It takes them longer to do their job. It costs them more money. They're losing customers. And they have an emotional impact. And emotion's a very important motivator when we talk about buying because that is truly how we first decide it's time to change. And even if they're thinking about changing, they're already doing something. And we want to try to understand those alternatives or what the real competition is and where they're falling short so that you can kind of start to articulate to your customers, here's where we fit and we're a little bit different. When we talk about implications, there are 3 types. So these are all of these consequences. So is it costing me more time? Is it costing me more money? Or is it costing me more effort? And these are the important things you want to try to learn from your customers about what is actually happening for them while they try to solve this problem. And we know that emotions are hard to talk about. So if you're trying to identify the emotional impact that your customers have, sometimes we get a little freaked out about asking people how they feel. So this will be a helpful tool for you. If you look at this wheel, we've got all the things from fear, anger, sad, peacefulness, surprise, and happiness. And we know that painkillers are more important. So when we look at these types of emotions, if your customers are telling you that they're pretty happy with what they have, they're feeling pretty calm, there's nothing really crazy going on, they're not going to be emotionally motivated to buy from you. You want to find these people that are angry, that are fearful, or that are experiencing sadness with the current offerings they have so that you can bring in some of that joy. That's why we do what we do. So we want to craft that problem statement, start to say that back and forth to our customers so that they resonate and they go, oh, you know what? You get it. You get my problem. I want to talk to you. And as you have these conversations, we want to try to focus in to try to find these 10 innovators or these 10 first customers. And we're going to use a process called bifurcation. So bifurcation is a computer science piece where you go either or. So if I was inviting Craig over for supper, I might say, hey, Craig, we're going to have dessert after dinner. Do you want to have ice cream or cake? And
Both.
Craig will say,
Both.
and I'll say, Craig, you can't have both. We're not Marie Antoinette. In
Okay.
bifurcation, it's an either or. So you got to choose. Do you want cake or ice cream?
I'm going to get ice cream.
Perfect. So now I'll ask him, do you want chocolate or vanilla ice cream?
Ooh, chocolate.
Okay. And now do you want sprinkles or fudge on top?
Oh, fudge.
Perfect. So now I know exactly what to make Craig for dessert. If you get stuck with figuring out what you want to do for supper, this is a really good process to go through with a friend or family member, by the way. So we want to bifurcate to try to get down to the people that are most motivated to buy from us and to narrow our niche. So this is one of the biggest mistakes early stage founders make when they're trying to sell, because they go, I'm just going to get anyone that will buy from me. I call this the spray and pray method. If you throw spaghetti at the wall, sure, some of it will stick, but it's really hard to get it to repeat that pattern. And we want to find something repeatable so that you can go out and continue to do other cool things in your business. So Jill talks about this, the narrower your niche, your fatter your wallet. So the whole focus of bifurcation is we want to go through this process to try to get down to the 12.5% of the customers that are most likely willing to buy from us. So I'll give you an example of a company in Edmonton that was working on some equipment drying pieces for hockey gear. So the idea was that they had this little product, you put it in with your bag and it would help your hockey equipment dry faster. So they said, well, we're going to try to sell to parents. And when Craig and I were first working with them, we said, okay, well, first of all, we need to figure out what problem are you solving? So what does wet hockey gear cause for an issue for a parent? Any guesses? And toss it in the chat. Why would a mom or a dad care about wet hockey gear in their house? It stinks, totally. Stinky hockey gear means stinky house. So we don't like that. So that's the problem we're trying to take away for these customers. And then they said, well, we're going to sell to parents. So we're like, oh, that's tough. Which one are you going to pick? So we'll go through this, put some of your thoughts in the chat. So if we want to go through this either or question and try to figure out who's more motivated, who do you think cares more about stinky homes? Moms or dads? Moms, totally. So now we're going to try to focus on selling to moms. Now, how often do you think their kids are playing hockey? Do they play hockey once a week or 2 times or more a week? Jason's got it, 2 or more. It's harder to get your gear to dry when you're going out and playing more games of hockey. And we're going to ask one last question. How old are these kids? Are they 13 years or older or 12 years or younger? Perfect. Puberty, right? We're stinky when we're teens. And so this is how we get down to that 12.5%. And what I like about this process is we're not picking random demographic ages. A lot of the times I see early stage people go, well, I sell to anyone that's between 30 to 60. I want to try to find people that wear blue shirts. And these seem to be like no reasoning behind them. So this process helps us really dig down into the actual motivations that would cause people to want to buy from us. So this is how you would do this from a B to C process, or business to consumer, if you're selling something directly to customers. But if you're in business to business, you have to go through another process. Oftentimes what happens is we'll go, oh, well, I want to sell to companies that make, $5 million a year, that don't have a full-time HR company, and they have their family-owned business. So that's great, but who am I going to try to sell to in that corporation? So when we're selling to a business, we want to go through this process to try to figure out who in that company we're going to sell to. Usually we want to try to sell to the guys that have billions of dollars because they seem like really good customers, but they're really hard to get to when you're starting out because you don't have any brand awareness, and they're a little risky because your product's not totally verified yet. So we want to try to think about, where do those people come from? So when we're going through bifurcation, they're either hired from outside the company to come in, or they're promoted. 80% of the time, they're hired from a different company. And we want to look at usually companies that are a little bit smaller in what they make. And we want to figure out where those people come from. And when you go through this process, you can now figure out, okay, I want to try to target people that make less money, that have this positioning. And Craig and I really like to sell to people with VP in their title because they're the people that manage a budget. And Craig will talk a little bit about their type of motivations for these types of folks. So if you're selling B2B, you have to do this process twice, but we really want to figure out who in that company are we selling to. I've got some friends that are CFOs and they tell me CFOs are really hard to sell to, especially if they're accountants, because they're really cheap and they like to make their own thing. So unless you're going to fix their expense by 25% or more, don't bother trying to talk to them. So that's why we like VPs, because they're probably more willing to move. So once we know what problem we're solving and who we think our first customers are, Craig, how do we start to position ourselves?
Yeah, so just back to that problem statement that you had, you talked about this group. They're using an alternative, even though it might have some shortcomings. So one of the things that Brandy and I hear on a pretty regular basis, people say, we have no competition. You always have competition. The way that a lot of companies look at, or entrepreneurs look at competition, is they look at people that do the exact same thing. They have a 2x2 matrix with their logo in the top right-hand corner and other logos that maybe are grayed out. But it's not about people that do the exact same thing. It's about all the different ways that people are solving the exact same problem. And there are 3 different types of competition. Yes, there are people that do something exactly the same or very similar to you, and you might say, we don't have any of those. You might have them, you might just have not found them yet, because maybe they do it in a different language or they're not as public as you might be. But we want you to think about different forms of competition. What is the most commonly used way of solving the problem? And Brandy talked about finding ways to solve expensive problems. Well, what's the most expensive alternative to this process? And in the problem statement, we talk about what are some of the shortcomings of what people are using today. These on the left are the shortcomings that other solutions actually have. And the example I'm going to use to help you try and understand this is that when Southwest Airlines first came out, it only flew between 3 cities in Texas: Dallas, Austin, and Houston. So put in the chat, when Southwest Airlines first came out, what do you think it viewed as its competition? What's the competition to Southwest Airlines? Let's see what people come up with. You can drive, take the train. It's all the different ways you can solve the problem. You can rent a car, you can rent a jet. So when you think about competition, think about all the other ways that people solve the problem. And one of the ways you want to find a way to differentiate yourself, we're going to teach you a process which we call a 7-second sale. So now you know who has a problem and what they're using today. The goal is to be able to come up with something that creates interest. Now, the mistake that way too many people make is they're like this. They're like what we all think of, these telemarketers that call us at home while we're having dinner. They tell us all about their product or service. What we need to realize is that no matter what you're selling, everybody's listening to a radio station. And that radio station is called What's in It for Me. So instead of trying to tell people what you want to say, why don't you find a way to tell them what they actually want to hear? And what they want to hear is, how are you going to take that problem away? And it's a very simple structure. We help ICP, which Brandy has helped you figure out who is your ideal client. You help them take away a problem. And there are 6 verbs that we have found that are the most powerful, that help people understand the value of being your customer. How do you help them avoid, mitigate, prevent, reduce, minimize, or eliminate the problem that you have then identified? And this is the way that it actually works. You tell somebody, we help these people solve this problem. The goal is to have them ask you, how do you do that? For an example, there's a company up in the northeast part of Calgary that makes these cables and grain exchanges that measure temperature and moisture so they know when the grain is going bad. And their value proposition is, we help VPs of finance minimize inventory write-downs. And what's the only question they ever ask? How? And then this is when most entrepreneurs make a mistake. They tell people how. They puke all over the customer. This is how we do this. If they ask how, don't tell them how. You need to learn before you earn. That's why the learn box comes before the earn box. So what we suggest is you say, hey, you know what? I can tell you how, but can I ask 3 really quick questions first? Can you tell me more about the problem? How big is the problem? What's the impact or consequences of that problem? How often does this problem happen? And what do you think actually causes the problem? And then what you want to try and find a way to do is to say, you know what? I think you actually might have a different problem, or there's a different cause to that problem. Would you be willing to give me 5 minutes so I can explain to you what the real problem or real cause is and how you can solve it? And the goal then is to reframe this whole piece. And what we've learned through a really smart guy named Donato Diorio is that when you get a chance, you always want to try and find a way to have another person from the prospect on a call where maybe you go into detail. His data says you are 300%, 3 times more likely to get someone as a customer if you have them on that call. So now we think we have a sense of what it's all about. There's a process that Brandy's going to share with you that helps you use this to get your first 10 customers.
This is called enrolling. So the lady in the picture is Heidi Neck. She's the lady that introduced Craig and I to this process. And Jerry Vass talks about this in a book that he wrote a while back, and he calls it flanking. So I always like to think about this when you have the door-to-door salesperson come that's asking for, switch your energy provider or whatever. You answer the door and you look like the guy on the left. We have our armor up. We're like, I'm eating supper. What are you doing at my house? And every time we try to sell, this is how our customers react. So our goal is to try to get to their side view. And you can see in this diagram that they're not as protected on the side. And the way that we do this with these innovators, so those cards that Craig showed you at the beginning of the slide, these are people that want to be cool, that want to work and get their hands dirty and build something with you. So we want to try to get their side view, and we're going to use a script that takes, 5 seconds to write probably, Craig. And you're going to say, hey, Craig, my name's Brandy, and I'm reaching out because I'm hoping you have a couple minutes to give me some feedback on something that I'm planning to do to help our ICP remove, eliminate, reduce, mitigate their problem. I'm not selling, I'm just asking for feedback. So Craig and I have learned over the years of doing this that when you ask for money, you get advice. When you ask for advice, sometimes you wind up with money. This is how innovators work. So take this, you can put this in LinkedIn, you can use this on phone calls if you've got current customers. If you are a service provider and you're trying to build a product, this is a really good thing to do with your current customers, to go back and get them to tell you what they know about the problem and if you've got your ICP and the problem in the right way. So you're validating all of this in real time. Christy Jones wrote a book called Selling Your Way In. Really awesome book. But what we like about what she talks about is how you want to sell in your backyard first. So your ICP should be groups that you can reach. They're people that you know, and you can start by selling in your network. So these are going to be people that already have some trust with you because they know who you are. They're willing to work with you. When we talk about these 10 sales, though, we want you to try to aim to get 10 sales from what's called an arm's length organization or customer, meaning that you can't have a first degree connection to them. And this is where it gets really tough, and why we want you to build these repeatable processes with these innovators so that you can go and try to find them. One of our favorite things to ask after you've done enrolling with someone is go, hey, do you know anyone else that I could be talking to? And they might go, yeah, you know what? Mina at the Peterborough Innovation Cluster would be a great person for you to talk to. And if they're not willing to share her contact information, I'm going to go find her on LinkedIn. I'm going to send her a message. I'm going to say, hey, I got your name from Craig Elias. I'm working on this project, trying to solve this problem for these people. Do you have a little bit of time to talk to me? So this is how we find these people through our networks without marketing, without putting any ads out, just by talking to people we know. So these are the first 5 things we want to do to try to get to our 10 sales. Do we have any questions about any of the 5 boxes we ran through?
So I saw a question in the chat, Brandy, but of course the slides are on my computer, so I couldn't go over there. Someone says, do you always have to solve a problem?
Must all businesses and ideas be a painkiller? Yomi. I'm of the camp that this answer is a yes. Now, when we get into maybe like aesthetics or entertainment companies, it can be tough, but we're still taking away a pain for someone, whether it's boredom in this piece. So we really want to try to flip talking about benefits to a pain. And my assumption would be that you likely already have a pain. We just have to think about how we stop talking about all the benefits that you do and start to talk about all of the things that you're going to take away for the customer. I have yet to find a company that we can do that with. Craig, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm of the camp. There's always a pain or a problem. And when the pain or problem exists, people tend to act sooner. So you might get lucky on occasion. And some of it is, if it's retail therapy and it's less than 50 bucks, it's see, want, buy. But when you start selling things that are more expensive, people very often have to leave behind something they use today, and they have to become unhappy with what they use today before they actually move forward, which actually leads into the next section. And I know this is supposed to be Brandy's slide, but since I'm on this rant, I'm going to steal this slide. So now we're moving into the piece where, great, we've done this 10 times. We begin to see a pattern. Now we're still doing outbound, no inbound yet. And when I talk about dissatisfaction, the dissatisfaction is very often caused by or created by an event.
So Craig, before we jump into that, I've got a question about flanking in the chat that I just want to highlight really quick.
Yeah.
So James said, if I've got a deal champion and with a target account, I'm selling B2B, this person's helping me understand the account structure, what's going on, they can help advocate for us. Would this be considered an example of flanking?
So I'm going to say maybe, or I'm going to say the answer I hate the most, which it depends. The thing that we need to understand, the coach or champion is great, but we need to figure out who's the guy or the gal that is going to be the customer, the person that actually pays, and what's the problem that person has. So we can use the champion to hopefully find a way to introduce us. The hard part I find though is trying to sell up an organization gets to be really hard. So my preference always is start at the top. What I find happens is when you start at the top, you then get introduced to someone who will become your champion. Starting at the top and selling down is a lot easier than starting at the bottom and selling up. Now, maybe you can use that champion to help you figure out what is the problem that the decision maker has, sometimes called the economic buyer, because it's their money or their P&L that is being impacted by the problem. So it's not my preferred way. You can make it work. I just find it's a whole lot harder and it takes a whole lot longer when you do that.
Totally.
These events, so what we're looking for is we're looking for people that are unhappy with the way things are. So people are happy, they stay happy, then all of a sudden something happens. And the reason that they need to be unhappy, the data from Olivia Wong says there needs to be at least a 3-point difference between what you sell and what they use today, which means if you ask the decision maker, economic buyer, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with what you use today? It needs to be a 7 or less. If it's more than a 7, odds are they're not going to become your customer. If it's a 7 or less, they're more likely to become your customer. So we need to get an understanding of what are these events that make people unhappy and have them say, hey, I want to change. So people start out in this buying mode of status quo. They're happy. They see no reason to change. Then all of a sudden, one day they have an event. Something raises their expectations or lowers their performance of what they think they're getting today. This makes them want to change. This puts them into what we call a window of dissatisfaction. They're thinking of changing, but they're so busy solving other problems, they haven't gotten to this problem yet. But this moment is when they decide what is the problem and how are they going to solve that problem? Which way? We talked about alternatives, competition. You need to get here now because this is when you get to help them frame what is the problem and the alternative, the way they're going to solve it. Then they very often have to have a second event where now all of a sudden they have more money, more time, more resources. They can afford to change. Now they start looking at maybe some of your competitors just to make sure that they're getting value by being your customer. But then they need to have a third event because they need to justify the decision to themselves, or sometimes they need to justify the decision to somebody else. And the way they justify is using a process called RIPES. So it's all about risk avoidance. Do you help people avoid risk? Do you make them look better through image? Are you going to find a way to increase their productivity, spend the same amount of money, get more stuff done? Or are you going to help them lower expenses, get the same stuff done, but spend less actually doing it? Are you going to help them for an environmental, social, governance reason? Or are you the simplest, fastest person to actually do business with? And here's what the data actually says. The data says you are 5 times more likely to get someone as a customer when you get to them while they're in the window of dissatisfaction. And some people say, well, this is applied to my business. So here's what Beth says. Beth says it doesn't matter if you're selling refrigerators or jet engines. It applies. McKinsey's done some work related to this from a consumer perspective. People have this loyalty loop on the inside. They do the same thing. They do the same thing. They do the same thing, right? They did a ton of research in 5 industries, 3 continents. People all of a sudden need to have this event, this trigger that creates interest. Then they create this consideration set. Which way am I going to solve the problem? And then McKinsey says, well, people all of a sudden then make a decision based upon a trigger. My argument is most people need to have another event where they can afford to change. So I just want to give people an example. What do you think is the one event that drives more people to buy life insurance than all of the other events combined? What's the event that drives people to buy life insurance? Stick it in the chat. Death. That would be one example, but it's not the one that causes more people to buy life insurance than all of the other ones combined. Yeah, as soon as you pee on a stick and there's a little blue or red strip. The other event that causes a lot of people to make changes, whether it's on a personal level or on a corporate level, is when people get a job. Brandy, what did you buy when you got a new job?
Got a new car because I could finally afford it.
Yeah, and then for me, what I realized is that, I had a certain wardrobe that I wore, and I realized that when I joined the place where I now work, over at Alberta Innovates, I needed to have a different look, different brand, so I spent $3,500 on a whole new wardrobe. So these events that make people want to change, they come in 3 flavors. We call them the A's, the B's, and the C's. There's this awareness strategy that you try. You're trying to educate the customer. These are the reasons you should become our customer. The hard part is it seldom works. What we're looking for is people that have had a bad experience with what they use today, very often caused by a change in people. We have no control over this, but if we're waiting for someone to have a bad experience, it's not so much they want to be your customer, they just don't want to be somebody else's. But our favorite is when there's a change in the decision maker. So when you think about a change in people, these are very often what are called mobilizers. These are the individuals that are focused on driving productive change within their organization. Even within a family, there's a certain group. Now, if you're selling to businesses, which is where we try to focus, here's what the data says. The data says that a VP who's new in their job that will spend $1 million or more in their first year, 70% of them will spend that money in their first 90 days. Now, you might think that job changes don't create a whole lot of opportunities, but here's what we can tell you. Every time somebody changes a job, it creates 4 different opportunities. So if I've got this customer named Brandy and she goes somewhere else, of course, I'm going to follow her. She was my customer in the past, likely to become my customer again. Well, then I want to figure out who did Brandy replace, because that guy or gal has gone on to a place, has more money, more authority, more influence than Brandy has. I want to get to them while they're new in their job. Then I'm going to figure out who replaced Brandy. Sometimes I want to do that because I want to keep them as a customer. Maybe I want to sell them more. But when you go talk to the person that replaces Brandy, the first question you want to ask is, where did you come from? And when you're reaching out, there are two best times in a week. You want to try and find a way to reach out on Monday morning because something's either on their list to solve that week or it's not. And the second best time to reach out is on Friday afternoons because it's either been on their list all week or it's gotten on their list throughout the week. And now you got all these opportunities. The question is, what are you going to do with them, Brandy?
Totally. So, Craig, before we move to the next box of earn, I want to talk a little bit about these changes because what happens if I am selling to someone and the person that I had as a contact in the company moves on?
So
What does that mean for me?
So say that question again.
If I already have a customer, like if I'm selling to you and you were at an organization and then you left to go work at a new company, what does that mean for me as a vendor?
Well, it means that the way if I'm hearing the question right, it means that things are at risk and you need to find a way to get in there before they decide to change. Here's what the data suggests. The data suggests that 31% of all vendor switches are triggered by a change in salespeople.
Totally. So be wary. So Craig is saying, okay, we've got all these people. Often what happens is we got these startups that come to us and they go, I have 500 people on a wait list and no one registered to come to my demo. What did I do? And we go, oh, you didn't disqualify and go through this process of figuring out who your ICP is and what problem you have. So we want to have a sales funnel where we've got a lot of leads, but we don't want it to feel like this, where it takes forever to try to find a customer that's actually willing to buy from us. We want it to look like this, where it's very quick and easy to get someone from interested into a conversion. And the way that we want to do this is by using a rubric to help evaluate the sales that you're making at this stage. So you're going to look at 5 qualifying factors, and our 5 favorite are this. Do they fit in the ICP? Are they aligned with something called spin selling, where we actually know there's true consequences and implications to the problem? Are they close to us? What's the competition? And have they had a trigger event? And we're going to score them a 2, a 1, or a 0 for each of these as we're talking to them. So an example might be, they might be an ideal client for me. Maybe they resonate with the problem, but the consequences aren't quite there. They're similar demographics to me. They're using a direct competitor, so it's harder for them to switch over. And they're at the point where they can afford to change. So I'm going to add this score up, and I'm going to have a 5 for that. Now, is a 5 good or bad? It is just a number. So if I'm selling and I keep hitting 5s, I'm going to try to sell to 5s and I'm going to get rid of the 3s in my funnel. But one day I might meet someone that is like this. And now all of a sudden they're an 8. So I'm going to try to remove all the 5s out of my funnel and only sell to 8s. This is a really tough thing to do when you're starting to earn because you're going, oh, look at all the deals I'm missing. But what ends up happening is you've got a product that nobody really likes or resonates with. Now, we talk a lot about, well, people keep changing. What's happening? How do we become this emotional favorite and catch them before these trigger events happen? Here's the process of how we make decisions. So we have to start by defining the problem, and then we have to design our solution, and then we figure out how to buy, and we've got all these different levels of concerns that happen. The most important thing I want you to see in this diagram, though, is that it all starts with people. When we are defining our problem, we talk to the people that we feel are near or close to us. So the word of the day is propinquity for you. This means feeling close to someone, whether it's physically or psychologically. And there's some really cool research out there that talks about how this works. So if you take a look at these different, we'll call them temperaments that Charlie created, where do you think the best person to buy from would be? Is it the person that has credibility and reliability, so the expert in the room? Is it the steward, someone that's reliable but isn't as focused on them? Is it the doer, the person that creates intimacy and is also reliable? Is it the connector, the person that helps build relationships, a catalyst that moves things along, or the professor? I've got a guess for number 3, got a guess for 4. So what often happens is when we're entrepreneurs, we think we have to be the smartest person in the room, right? We need to know, we need to prove to them that we're good at what we do. What ends up happening, though, is that's not actually why people buy. Daniel's right. People buy from people that do things. So you need to be reliable, meaning that you're going to follow up and do the things you say you're going to do. And we need to create this intimacy. So becoming an emotional favorite happens at this stage before people start to look for alternatives. Once they're already looking for alternatives, you've probably lost a chance. So the way that we create some of these propinquity pieces is by being visible. So this is my LinkedIn. This is a screenshot of my background page. I built this to mimic the Startup Commons model when I was getting my job at Alberta Innovates because I wanted to build something creative for a cover letter. And interestingly enough, when I posted this, it's all about your career path. A guy named Steve McElvenna, who's a professor at the U of L, dropped me a note and he said, "Oh my gosh, I'm trying to teach my students about this. Will you come and be a guest speaker?" I used to work at the U of L. I hadn't heard from him for 8 years. It's these kinds of updates and things that we do in our network that help people reach out to us. The other way that I do this is I put in information about what I do for my volunteer time. So I work in tech, but I love the outdoors. I love working with people. I'm a trained teacher. I play piano, all of these fun things that I get to show a little bit about myself to people in unique ways. And I learned about this from my mom. She was a travel agent, had her own company for years, and had insane relationships with clients that worked with her for like 40 years. When she started her company, Husky moved over to her because of the relationship that she had with them. So how do we do this? Well, we just be ourselves. So I said I love the mountains. Last summer, I went to Iceland with my roommate. We climbed a glacier, and then within the very next 24 hours, I got to be at the top of a volcano. And no one ever wanted to go hiking with me, so I got a dog. So that's Loki there at the waterfall with me, and I finally found a guy that was kooky enough that liked to go hiking with me and my dog Devin, that we can now go around and do cool things. And this is also how Craig and I do a lot of our work. This was us last year. We went on a hike down in Crow's Nest Pass. That's my dog Loki, and then that is Craig and Cole.
Yeah, and I remember this because this is just before we had this massive snowstorm. So funny enough, Brandy and I were actually out last past weekend. There is a hike called Sorrel Ridge, and it's on number 2 on the top of the list for destinations for a lot of people's lists in Kananaskis. It's not maybe the best hike because it's super hard to get to. You got to go up to this lake, and then you're going to go around the back, and you've got to go up this ridge. So what we had heard is that there used to be a rope that was there. And if you look at this picture, you can see what's happened this year is it's so rainy that all these people that are trying to hike up get to this one spot where the rope used to be, and they all turn back. So Brandy and I last weekend, we hiked up 2,500 feet of vertical climb just to put a rope up so other folks can actually get there. Now you can see down on the bottom right-hand corner, this is my dog Cole, and he's giving us the evil eye, like, what are we doing way up here? Cole is actually my second dog. When I moved to California, I lived on an island, and I had a roommate who was an animal control officer for the city. And while I was coming home to spend time with the lady who's now my wife, she would look after my dog. And this is him doing some of his favorite things, playing in a sprinkler. And when I had to put that dog down, it was 8 years before I found that I even wanted another dog. And I found a picture of Cole. That summer, I was off at the World Scout Jamboree, and my wife has taken my dog to the cottage where she is right now in the Muskokas in Ontario. And every day she's sending me pictures of my dog while I'm at this camp. Don't get me wrong, I love my wife. But when she's sending me pictures of my dog every day, I'm missing my dog more than I'm missing my wife. So now that we've got all of this stuff figured out, the important thing is how do you find a way to replicate your best sales? So for me, it's all about asking the right questions. And the mistake a lot of people make is they analyze the deals they've lost instead of the deals they've won. So this is our process. When you win a deal, you want to figure out what was the event or what were the events that led up to this purchase. When you ask the first question, though, the problem is they tell you about the second event when they could afford to change, and we got to get there sooner. So we need to ask the question, when did these events change? And then we want to understand, why did someone become our customer? But we're not allowed to ask why questions because why questions make people defensive. So we ask the question, what made you choose us? And what we're listening for is the verbs that people use to describe the value or outcome or the problem you took away, why they became your customer. Question number 4. Question number 4 comes from some of the work done by a guy named Kurt Lewin. There's all these reasons to change, The ripes that I talked about earlier on the left, those are all the reasons to change. But there's all these restraining forces, all these things that push against change, sometimes called switching costs. So question number 4 really is all about how do we find a way to make it easier to become a customer? And question number 5 then becomes, where can we find more people just like you? When you get to the point where you're getting lots of wins, the goal is you just want to focus on the deals that happen fast. It was easy to get to a decision maker. They didn't nickel and dime you on a price, and they're willing to be a reference. You want to focus on those that have 3 or more check marks next to their name. So before we go on to the last thing, and then Brandy's going to talk about something called a marketing moat, does somebody have a burning question they want to have answered before we get to the last thing? Was there one earlier, Brandy?
No,
I
I think
have a
we're good. We're just
question.
asking for recording, but yeah, go ahead.
My name is IT. I'd like to ask a question. When you have a qualifying client, but they're really nickeling down on, the dollars and the penny, what would you do with that? So for example, you have one product, they want to buy 5 products, but they're really nickeling down on that dollar. What would you do?
So I think the hard part is 2 things. A, you might have found the wrong person because they're trying to nickel and dime you on price. So we need to find people who are much more inclined to focus on value, right? So I think part of it is recognizing maybe we've got the wrong customer or prospect. But I think the question then is great. If you only have this much money to spend, which of these products do you want to take out? Like, don't discount on your price. If you give something up, you always find a way to get something back. I would love to have you as a customer, but I can't do it at that price. What do you want to take away? What's your maximum budget? Let's give you something you can use, because you want to find a way to land and then expand or fit in and stand out. But if you've got someone who's a nickel and dimer, I'm like, turn around and run.
Yeah, they're probably not in your ICP.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Hi, Brandy. Hi, Craig.
Hey.
I had a question around the best time to reach out slide. And if it's historical or specific to VPs, because I've found lately, and this is probably within the last 4 months, that Monday mornings and Friday afternoons are like the worst time to reach out.
So good question. Worst time to reach out or worst time to actually reach somebody? Because they're 2 totally different things. Reaching, it's not that it's easy because it's hard, right? And sometimes you have to have multiple touches. You have to do it Monday and Friday, but these are the times when people have a problem. And if they were ever going to be your customer, now's the time to actually do that. But I just want to be careful, Brandy. We got not a whole lot of time left, and we got one last thing we want to share.
Perfect. So I know there's a couple questions in the chat. We'll see if we can get to them in a second. But Mark's iPhone, you said, how do we know we've reached product market fit? And we know when we've got 100 sales that have been repeatable. So that earn stage is all about fitting that product market fit so that you can find that ICP and build a repeatable sales process. Once we get across the chasm, we've got our early adopters. Now we want to start to focus on what's known as inbound or marketing. So Craig kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the call. We don't want to really be focused on marketing early on because we're figuring out our messaging. When we get to scaling, we want to start to focus on how do we make sure that what we've got built actually stands and is defensible. So we call this a marketing moat. And we learned a lot about the importance of marketing from a guy named Jonah Berger. He wrote a book and he talks about the power of word of mouth. So this is why we think sales is most important, because it outperforms any form of paid advertising by a factor of 2, which is a pretty big stat. So how do you be findable and how do you make sure that no one else can sell exactly the same thing that you are with your messaging? You want to be on every social media channel that you can be so that when people try to find you, they can. Now, here's the thing. It's not about your name and it's not about your company name, because people are going to forget your name. If you're a faces person, you'll get this. And you might forget a company name because how do you spell it? I don't really remember. Oh, I talked to this guy 3 months ago. He had this company. What was it? And then I can't remember what it is. But I want to try to use something called positioning. So Al Reese and Jack Trout wrote a book about this, and they talk about the fact that you want to try to come up with 2 or 3 keywords that your customers use in natural language to repeat this back. So there's a company in Medicine Hat called Medicine Hat Meats that makes something called soft beef jerky. They were one of the first people to do this. And what they did is they bought the URL that says soft beef jerky. They went out and got the social media handles at soft beef jerky, because people don't remember Medicine Hat Meats, but they're going to remember soft beef jerky. And as soon as I go into Google to look up soft beef jerky, guess what shows up on the SEO first? Medicine Hat Meats. So this is called mirroring. When you're talking to your customers at this stage, ask them, what 2 or 3 words would you use to describe my product or service? Once you get enough answers, that's where you'll be able to start to suck up all of that internet space. And I know that we had a space here for questions, but we want to make sure that we can wrap this up in time and get you going. So if you've got other questions, Craig will invite them to our deeper dive so that we can do some more stuff. So this is what we took you through today. We talked about how you learn, the 5 things you want to do to try to get to your first 10 arm's length sales. Once you do that and you get to those 10 sales, you can start to move into the earn, where maybe you've got a junior salesperson, you're still involved in the sales, and you're going to work on these 4 things to build repeatable sales to get to 100 customers. And you're going to keep doing these processes until you reach those sales. And then we can start to talk about inbound marketing, building moats, and doing all of that extra stuff.
So I know there's probably lots of folks on this call that are like, I want to get to this. I'm going to do something with it, right? I hope to be able to get something done this week. Here's what we know. It's called the law of diminishing intent. As Guy Kawasaki says very famously, hope is not a strategy. So that is why, for the first time, Brandy and I normally do this behind closed doors. So if there are folks on here that would love to do a deep dive on what this is, we have a 5-week mastering series that we're going to start on October 7th. We're going to do it Tuesday mornings. Each day we'll spend an hour on each of the different boxes. We're going to walk people through actually filling this in for themselves. So by the time you're done, you've got the entire thing finished. So usually it will be a regular price of $479. If you would like some help, so it's 40% off today. If you would like some help going through this process, we'd love to find a way to help you. If you want to find a way to bring a friend, or you want to do this as a group, there's also some group pricing. But the whole goal is during the 5 weeks, you'll get 15 hours of help so you can build out your entire canvas. So when you're done, you can then go away and start executing on this to make it all work. Now, I know Brandy and I have our own QR codes if you want to connect with us on LinkedIn, but I know that we also wanted to make sure that we have a survey. So if you will, just answer 1 to 5. And if you've got a little extra time before you leave, maybe just put in the chat, what was the biggest thing you took away from today's session? If there was one thing that was your big aha, what was that big thing that you took away? Marcelo, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Greg. Yeah, I was hoping that we could catch a group picture whenever you're done answering that question. It would be fun to have everybody on the screen.
And I'm going to go back just to this slide. So if people wanted to use the QR code to be part of the 5-week program.
And I see a couple of questions popping up as well.
Okay. Sales before marketing. Yeah. Customer work before market work. Front end stuff. Often people need to prove they're first at sales. Okay. So then I'm thinking, so we'll also make sure we send out a link to the registration page. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can then do a group picture. I'm just going to move this. So group picture. So we need to, do I need to change the layout? How do I change the view? Change the view to gallery?
Gallery is good. Yeah, gallery is good. All right, awesome. All right, everybody, turn on your cameras if you can, please. I'm just going to take a quick fun picture. And all right. Amazing, beautiful. Hey, awesome. Well, I do see questions. I do know that we're like 1 minute short. Greg and Brandy, do you have any final comments?
Just go out and talk to folks. Get started. Even for us, this process has been super interesting within our traction canvas. Brandy?
Yeah, I would just say, right, get feedback. This enrolling process is super valuable. And Craig and I have been walking that walk with this traction journey. So if you ever, I mean, if you want to take a look at how we started, go to our LinkedIn posts. You'll see the very first version of it. We've talked to about 40 people that have helped us build what we have today. So it's possible.
Amazing.
Thanks for
Well,
joining
thanks
us
so
today,
much.
guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Greg and Brandy. You are truly powerhouses. The mastering series, guys, is 40% off today. As Greg and Brandy mentioned, I will be sharing the link via email right now, right after the workshop, once the video is ready, as well as the slides. So make sure you use the day and sign up for it to go for a deeper dive with Greg and Brandy into getting your sales to the maximum. That being said, thank you so much, Greg. Thank you so much, Brandy, for joining us, for doing such a wonderful job today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us, for asking all the questions. Please feel free to reach out to the Innovation Cluster if you have any questions or if you need any support. That being said, thanks so much. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening, day, wherever you are in the world.
Good luck, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
All right.